So some of the ways that we're doing this, we're really, in most cases, working with people, with organizations that are working internationally with smallholders. We're often not the ones working directly with smallholders, though it happens in some cases, but we're often helping those that are working directly with smallholders. So that's, the NGO world, whether it's faith-based or more the secular. So we get Peace Corps volunteers requesting resources from us. And so we have, the way we do this is we have resources, we do education and training, and we have opportunities just for networking, just to have a platform for people to network and learn from each other. So when we look at resources, we actually produce technical documents that are going to be very similar to some of the ag extension documents that you all are producing for farmers around the US and maybe even globally. But we've been producing these since the 80s that are appropriate for smallholders in different countries around the world, especially focusing tropical climates. We have an online platform, we call it Echo Community, where all these resources are available for people to access. And we are also finding resources that are beneficial from other organizations that we're able to place on that platform for people to use. So we have a wide range of just resources. We also, you're going to get to see it, but we have a seed bank. And in the very early years, our founder worked really close with a person with USDA in Puerto Rico. And it was a guy named Frank Martin who had a passion for underutilized crops and looking at underutilized crops. So he said very early on, he's like, Echo, this is a gap that hasn't been met, and there is a lot of potential for meeting needs through these underutilized crops. So in the early years, now it's almost becoming a house known name, but moringa was like one of the early things we were talking about, nutritional value in different countries. So that's one example of many underutilized crops at the time that we've been talking about and helping promote with small scale farmers. Education and training. So at this location here, we have a 14-month internship program for college graduates. And so people can come here and work on our farm and get a piece of land, and you're gonna get to see little bits and pieces of that, but you can actually get really hands-on experience to complement your education. So some of us are products of land grant institutions over the years and have been, I'm looking at these guys because we're all former Echo interns way back in the day. But we've been able to come here and get hands-on experience working on our farm here. We also do week-long courses for people, development workers who want to focus in on tropical agriculture, maybe specific topics. Like this year, we're going to do one on livestock. So those are just some things, ways that we do training here in Florida, and our regional offices also have their own trainings that they're doing throughout the year. And then the thing I get passionate about, and even just having you all here today, is the ability to network. And so often just to be able to share with each other what we're doing and learning from each other. And the development world has a lot of barriers. It has a lot of competition for grant money and all sorts of things. But Echo's been able to be in this realm where we can bring people together to share ideas. And so a lot of the things we're talking about here at Echo were not ideas that Echo came up with. It's we learn from others and are able to share with a broader audience. And so I think that's what's really unique about Echo, is providing that. Like you all are through land grant institutions, you're able to bridge that gap a lot of time and take that research and apply it to the farmers. And so we're looking at a lot of the similar issues and ways to do that. So networking, we have a conference every year here in Fort Myers, Florida. Our regional offices have biannual, I guess every other year, however you say that, conferences. And then we also have our online platform where we actually have forums where people can post questions and share their information. So that's kind of in a nutshell some of the things that Echo is doing, kind of give you an overview as we dig a little more into hurricane preparedness. But I thought it'd be good just to give you a little bit of introduction to what Echo is doing.
So I'm going to add a little bit to what Brian said in terms of what we do. There's also a public education component to Echo. So we're here in Southwest Florida. We have a lot of tourists, a lot of traffic coming through, and so our global farm is open to the public. And so we offer public tours. We have it's close to, I think, 10,000 visitors each year will come here. We put on several events throughout the year, and that plays into what I think our response and recovery was about as well, is getting our campus back into shape so that we can receive visitors, so that function of that public tour can continue. Echo is supported through many small gifts of people that are visiting us and just see that, oh, this is something worthwhile, and so they want to help us out. And so that's an important part of our revenue.
When we're talking about appropriate technologies, we're typically looking for it to meet a couple of different categories. One would be economically sustainable technologies, so things that we're looking for things in the developing world, usually in the tropics. We're specifically focused on the small-scale farmer. Wouldn't have to be, but those are the sorts of technologies that we're really looking at. And so economically sustainable is very important because we're dealing with a demographic that doesn't have a lot of income to invest in certain technologies. Another parameter that we look at is it locally available? Might not necessarily have to be the actual technology being locally available, but would they have available parts and support to support that technology if it breaks or need help troubleshooting? And then looking at environmental sustainability, we want to try to make sure that we're offering solutions that will be actual solutions in the long term and not a short-term fix, but a long-term problem. And we're really looking for things that reliably meet the need, but in a simple way. Simpler typically is better. It's easy for us to over-engineer things and get the best absolute technology possible, but really what we need are simple fixes that can be replicated in a variety of contexts. There's some simple technologies and techniques that we will use to make our own forms of pest control. So whether that be using neem trees and using the seeds, there's small oil presses that you can use to press the seeds to get the oil, then utilize the neem oil. Maybe another way or technique is doing things like indigenous microorganisms and different foliar sprays that you can actually use biologicals to help control different pests. That would be more of a technique related thing, but not necessarily a technology, but we focus on both. And another one, maybe one that I use a lot, are ways to treat bamboo against pests after it has been harvested. So not necessarily in the living system, but making bamboo durable over the long term. It can easily succumb to things like powder post beetle. And so we actually, by using a borate solution, which can usually is fairly readily available in the developing world, but you can adapt a simple backpack sprayer to use what they call a modified boucherie method of pushing this borate solution through the bamboo comb, to help preserve it against wood-destroying organisms. So some of them would be more of a using what you would typically think of as pest control, but other ones might be related to building materials that we're using, things like that. There are some specific diseases that garner a lot of interest. And actually, just even in our more local network, like Haiti, they're having a lot of problem with citrus greening now, and they're saying, well, what can we do about citrus greening? And some of those things have been we've published some sort of document on. Others have been mostly connecting people with the experts that work with that. One of the other things that we promote and have done, there's a fair amount of in Southeast Asia, are protected ag structures. So using fine mesh insect netting and maybe greenhouse plastic for the top. We have one example here, just a very simple structure made of bamboo, low-cost structure, but you can hopefully create a pest-free environment for the most part. So we have a lot of information on composting and actually a fair amount of information on beneficial soil microbes and things that you can inoculate your soil with beneficial microbes. Composting can be a big part of that. The other piece of that would be using biochar as well and inoculating that with beneficial microbes to be able to help sustain a little bit more resilient soil life and hopefully help increase your beneficials in your soil and decrease the pests. Yeah, and we do a decent amount of training on making simple ways to make your own compost or biochar. We really encourage biodiversity to make a resilient system. So utilizing biodiversity in our plants, but also in our soils, and focusing on soil life. Our farm manager, Andy Cottarelli, does a great job of training and helping people see that soil is living, and there is a lot of things that we can do to either help that or hurt that, and especially in the tropics. So even using a technique like mulching to help protect your soil, and incorporating compost and incorporating green manures and cover crops to help boost your soil fertility, but also the microbial life in the soil.
Just to give you all an impression of what Hurricane Irma did and how we responded. Oh man, wrong way. All right. So as you know, Florida, we get a lot of yellow and red traffic there. Lots of hurricane activity over the years on our Atlantic side, and then we're dealing with Category 4 is when Irma made landfall down in Marco Island. I believe this was Friday before Irma hit, and if you look at where this path is going, it did shift inland, but it's basically right on top of us. And so this is looking in closer. So we were a little nervous on Friday afternoon. We saw this black line cruising right past our campus. Also want to mention, we had a lot of rainfall. So we were about 10 inches above normal for June, July, August rainfall. So we went into Irma with totally saturated soils with 40 inches where we normally have 30 inches, which is also a lot. But we had an extra 10 inches of rain in the system before Irma hit us. So this is just a timeline of kind of what happened. So the week prior to Irma, the Echo leadership decided to do a response of level 3, which is our internal response to basically get as ready as we can. And so we had different levels depending on the risk of a hit. So we went to level 3, so the campus was bustling, everybody getting ready. The next day was Wednesday, and it was all staff, all hands on deck, getting things ready, putting up shutters, cleaning up, doing all kinds of preparation, covering electronics or whatever. And then on Thursday, all the staff were released to go take care of their homes and their families. Friday to Saturday before the storm hit, there was a small group that stayed here, and they had permission to do so, to stay in some of the campus housing that is rated for, I think, 130 plus mile an hour winds. So those homes were able to be occupied by some interns and staff. And then on Sunday, the storm struck and we lost power in the afternoon. And then after the storm, staff were expected to come back to work on the Tuesday after the storm. So some showed up and some work began. And then the staff continued to filter in, as well as volunteers. We had a lot of help come from locally and from out of state. People coming and bringing supplies, tools, water, whatever it was, and their help. Then we did get some power restored to kind of this part of the campus, the southern part, on the 17th. And then our main shop, which you'll see later, the power came on about 16 or 17 days after the storm. So that was like sometime on the 25th. I'm not sure exactly which day the power came on, but it was more than 2 weeks after the storm. So that's kind of a timeline. This is a little image of kind of before and after. So you can see things were green and lush, and then got kind of beat up and toasted, less canopy there. This is an area where we had a lot of Australian pines come down and take down a power line, which is critical. It feeds the power to our main shop, and that's the power that was out for over 2 weeks. So just some other images of the campus, some flooding. There's a lot of water, but nothing too high. I don't know if we had any real high water in any of the farming areas. It drained away fairly quickly. Small amounts of damage, just small structures were damaged. This is a propane tank that proved to be critical during the storm. Farm structures, this is our pig house, was slightly damaged, but the roof was a tarp. This was the composting latrine. So thankfully nobody sheltered in the composting latrine. It would have been a terrible place to be. It was a total loss. Some big trees came down, and this is right in the global farm where the tour would go. So this is in our semi-arid farming demonstration. Same area. This was in our appropriate technology area. So some of these larger trees came down. And this was, we had small structural damage. So this is kind of the example of the structural damage we had. This is a very kind of light duty awning or overhang. We really escaped serious structural damage from the storm. So that was a total loss, but not really valuable. We'd removed plastic from this high tunnel structure, so the structure was fine. This is our shade house with a nursery, and the cloth was blown away, but most of the plants stuck around, and the structure itself was relatively undamaged. Our greenhouse, it's a fairly well-built structure, and we removed plastic and screen from it and took out some of the equipment like heaters and fans. Well, the fans are there. And so that structure was fine. Put plants below and they seemed to come through well. But there was a lot of labor involved in dismantling that. And then more examples of plant damage. We had some bamboo that, again, I think saturated soil, they just uprooted very easily. This is our main shop, packed full of vehicles to protect them during the storm.
That's a mix of Echo and staff cars.
Right. More big trees down. Drainage ditches were very full, but really no serious flooding on the campus. And this is that area that had, this used to be a wall of those Australian pines. And so all those pines were now in a big jumble right there on top of a power line. Some more bamboo down. This is a fruit tree planting, so these are avocados that really had a lot of damage. I think between the wet soil and the wind, a lot of them were blown over. We propped them up, but a lot of them have since then declined. I think the combination of stress from Irma and then potentially we've had some laurel wilt, so ambrosia beetles getting in them, and they have continued to just decline. This is in our rainforest, so some large trees that were pretty impressive at that point, but they came down. Some of the native pines fell down as well, likely due to the wet soil. Lychees don't do well in hurricanes. This is star fruit, so carambola. It was amazing. I didn't see any damage on the trees themselves, but they were loaded with fruit, and the fruit was all on the ground. So the trees recovered quickly. Some macadamia trees were really damaged. Then we responded to by protecting the trees immediately afterward by painting them. So that was our strategy, to try to get paint on the trunks, anything that was exposed, to protect them from the sun, to prevent sun scald and sunburn. And then we started propping trees. So everything from T-posts to wooden stakes. Just wanted to include a couple of numbers. We have a few small enterprises here at Echo that help to generate some income. They also provide interns with good experience in producing a product and interacting with the public to sell it. And one of those enterprises would be we do some produce sales. So we grow farm produce and we donate some and we sell some just out of our bookstore here. And wanted to show this, that going back, we've been kind of on an increase in our sales, but this was our Irma year, so it knocked us down, and then we're kind of rebounding again from that. But that was a pretty big blow to go from almost $15,000 in income down to maybe $8,000 or so. So it's a small activity, but it's still worthwhile to show. And then same thing happened. This is Irma for our nursery. We grow fruit trees and other edible plants. We sell those locally out of our nursery. And so we have a little dip there during our Irma year. Kind of just some rough numbers overall. We had roughly 60 very large trees or bamboo that blew down and had to be removed entirely. So many of these were the native slash pine, or they were bamboo clumps. So we lost a pretty considerable amount of kind of our mature canopy across the farm. And then about 100 smaller trees, more like the avocados that I showed you, where the tree, blew 25 or 30 degrees over, and we could pull it back up, and most of those trees could be recovered.
I think one of the things that you might have heard Andy mention too, we definitely saw an incidence of disease increase after the hurricane. What exactly was the cause? I don't know if we quite know the cause and effect necessarily, whether it was just an increased stress on plants and animals, because we had animal diseases as well, or if it was actually brought in by the storm. Maybe a combination of both.
The avocado?
Avocado was a good example of that, where laurel wilt we hadn't seen very much of, and then after that, either the combination, probably a combination, but the stress and the spread of the ambrosia beetle maybe at that point would cause we had, and we're still suffering with, a lot of laurel wilt problems with the avocados. And something that we battle, not just in hurricanes, but large rain events in the middle of summer where our soils are already saturated. It's really hard. Things like papayas and avocados that really struggle with the root-borne diseases like Phytophthora. It doesn't take very long for them to really show signs that they're struggling with it.
Yeah, I think as we were coming into the storm, I think we could rely in faith and know that we were going to be taken care of, in a sense, that we had a bigger power looking over us and willing to take care of us no matter what happened. So kind of the end story was already written. So we felt pretty confident through that, even though we were uncertain what the next page was going to look like, if I can say it that way. But I think really we saw it as we came out of the storm, and we all kind of, people were here on site, people left the state, people were in their homes here in Fort Myers, and then we all came back together. And I think we could, really join around and be grateful for the lack of damage that was there. There was damage, but we knew it could have been a lot worse. And so we were able to give thanks for that. And it just, I don't know. I think we do Monday morning devotions. That's the way we start off. And we start with prayer on our week. And so I think that kind of sets the basis for that to continue even in situations like this. And so we were able to see that play out. Sure, we had moments of uncertainty and probably didn't get along with each other as humans do. And so we had to work through those things as we went through this situation. But overall, we could kind of put our trust in something bigger than just ourselves and our own strength, because we did become weak. And there were times we were short with each other, and we had to work through those things, but we could ask for forgiveness and move on. And so I think we saw that over and over, and just being able to live into that helped us. And so that's kind of our story, I think, with it. Yeah.
We have a kind of a matrix, and actually Andy, he's the one that kind of developed it, but it looks at kind of the likelihood of impact and then the severity or intensity of the storm. And then we kind of built out, what would we do to prepare for that? So if we have, and the level 1, 2, 3 is really based on making some easier preparations early on when the risk is relatively low or the intensity of the storm is low, that we might just clean up so there's less stuff that might blow around, and buy some supplies, do things that doesn't take a lot of time, but at least that's out of the way and that's done. Level 2 is getting more serious. We might be pulling the shutters out and stacking them, but not putting them up. It's sharpening chainsaws and fueling up vehicles, things like that. And then so level 3 was basically our heightened top level preparedness, where shutters are up. We're doing everything we can to get ready.
I think one thing is a lot of eyes were on Florida at the time, with the storm coming, and people who knew us, knew the organization, knew where we were based. So you knew it was coming our way. So there was a lot of concern just even before, and hearing from people asking, how are we preparing, and things like that. And so then, of course, as soon as we could get word out, and social media played a role. I think our president CEO was able to share through social media and share how we were doing and even recovery updates. So I think that was really helpful. And I think, it was just amazing to see. We had this one man who is now in the Philippines working as a missionary, but he came and gave a lot of time and a lot of resources to help us clean up. And it's just pretty amazing to think about what they were willing to sacrifice to help us as an organization. It was pretty amazing. Yeah, humbling, really.
It was a really significant time, I think, of bonding between the staff and interns and volunteers. There was a lot of community building that went on, and just in that response and working through a challenge together. And it was a really neat time of seeing so much help pour in to our work here, and so much willingness to serve and to help. So this is a mixture of a work team and volunteers locally, and some coming from, the Midwest and East Coast. A number of them had been here before, maybe on a work trip. So we host work teams. In fact, next week we have work teams coming. They come from colleges, universities, church groups, civic groups, and they will come down for a few days to maybe a week and volunteer and work here on campus. So some of the volunteers that came during Irma had been on these work teams before, and so they just thought immediately, oh, I can take a few days off, I'll shoot down to Echo and help out. So we had a number of volunteers that they knew, they'd been here before. They knew us, they knew what we needed. And then we also had some local volunteers that were more like just an FGCU student or something, and they'd maybe come out for a tour and thought, hey, I'm not doing anything, I might as well just go up there and help out. So we had a real diversity, I'd say, in terms of skill. And there was always something that everyone could do. So there was simple tasks, or there was something like chainsawing or operating a piece of equipment.